The Silent Page. Reuben stared at the makeshift stockade and wondered at the virtue of it all. Normally, they'd just push on past a settlement like this. There were barely 100 people living here, perhaps half a dozen of whom were now armed and manning the defences. Armed was pushing it a little. Bows, yes, but they were short hunting bows, not the long war bows normally favoured by the Druge. He'd seriously doubted they'd have the strength to punch through armour at anything beyond short range. An assortment of knives, one or two with axes. There's no threat here to an Imperial army. Truth was, there was barely a threat for one unit here. But the location was just too close to their supply lines to risk leaving behind them. So here he was, conquering the Barons. When he'd signed up to join the valiant Pegasus with Hannah and Levi, he'd imagined something more courageous than fighting peasants with hunting implements. He ought to be grateful, he told himself. The war against the Druge was a murderous grind. They'd pushed the Orcs back, but only just. The Barons was a vast land, and the enemy were making them bleed for every inch. He hailed Tamas as the man walked back, still carrying the white flag he'd used to parley. The priest had been talking with the Black Wind Orcs for nearly half an hour. He'd used that time to get his hopes up. Surely it was a sign he might be making progress. But Tamas only shook his head and confirmed what he already knew. The Orcs were refusing to surrender. He let his breath out slowly. Nothing for it, then. They'd have to storm the settlement. Why do they do it? They hate the Druge. Why fight for them? It was a rhetorical question intended for the wind, but Tamas assumed an answer was expected. Oh, they told me that. In no uncertain terms. Over and over. They loathe the Druge with every fibre in their being. It's a burning passion that fills every waking moment for them. It's the one constant in their lives. There's just one thing in this world that they hate more than the Druge. Reuben closed his eyes. He didn't want to hear what he knew Tamas was going to say next. Us. They fucking hate us. They hate the Empire with a fervour beyond anything I've ever seen. They'd rather die to an Orc than surrender to us. Their leader knows the odds. He's certain they're all going to die today. And his only wish was to take just one of us with them before they all go. He told me that several times. Said it would be worth it if every one of them died, the children and all, even if they managed to kill a single one of us. Reuben ground his teeth together in frustration. Liberating these people was like chewing raw nettles. His spirit sagged and his head dropped. But then he felt his friend's hand on his shoulder. It is better, by far, to try and fail than fail to try. He looked up, and his priest locked eyes with him, refusing to look away. Tamas repeated the catechism again, and his deep, thoughtful voice was reaching deep into Reuben's soul. He felt the power flowing from the priest, felt the confidence and certainty welling up inside him. He could feel his doubts falling away like autumn leaves, his own objections to the impossibility of his orders paling into insignificance. He nodded his thanks to Tamas. Give the order to attack, but tell them to save every life they can. Overview. Imperial armies have invaded the Barons, aiming to carve a steel causeway straight through the middle of the territory. The attack caught the Druge off balance, and they quickly captured the Carmine Fields and Hope's Rest. In response, the Druge gathered their forces and counterattacked, seeking to drive the Empire out. But the Empire refused to be cowed, and their forces advanced towards the Fangs in the Bitter Strand. Were it merely a matter of steel, the Empire would have proved victorious, taking the Bitter Strand and capturing the Fangs, the strategically vital mithril resource on the edge of the Bitter Sea. However, the Imperial forces have embraced a more subtle strategy, one that forgoes military conquest in favour of sending a message to the inhabitants of the Barons. While the Imperial armies hold the line, scouts attempt to deliver a message of hope, asking old enemies to forget the wounds of the past and forge a common destiny against the Druge. Given the bitter history of recent campaigns in the Barrens, this attempt is challenging at best. The inhabitants here hate the Druge, but they have many reasons to hate the Empire, blaming them for their current plight, and not without due cause. The Torch of Freedom. One Imperial army, the Winter Sun, have a natural affinity for those who seek off the chains of enslavement. But they are elsewhere, and in their absence it falls to the generals of the valiant Pegasus and the Griffin's Pride to ring the clarion call of freedom. The valiant Pegasus in particular have committed themselves entirely to this crusade to bring liberation to the Barrens, devoting themselves to the virtue of their task. Virtue is contagious. It spreads from one heart to the next, a raging torrent that inspires allies and terrifies enemies. In its wake, it leaves swirling eddies, fever dreams in the hearts and minds of those it touches. Every crusade creates an opportunity for the Highborn Assembly to use a mandate to capitalize on the opportunity, and this one is no different. The crusade itself was supported by a number of important statements of principle passed with great majorities in the Synod. The Highborn Assembly upheld a statement put forward by Jericho, supporting the Knights of Dawn in their ambition to rescue captives from the Druge in the Barrens. The Dawn Assembly were unanimous in support of a statement by Mael Donjon of House Remis for Dawn and Highguard to continue our campaigns to exterminate the Druge and liberate those who are cruelly oppressed by them, while the Highborn Assembly were near unanimous in agreement with the same statement put forward by Tabris, son of Armisael. Soldiers of the valiant Pegasus. The Druge are broken and fleeing our siblings in the 7th wave, and the granite pillar will remain in Zenith to cleanse the Druge remnants. We will take up Dawn's challenge and head to the Barrens. There are tribes subject to the Druge that need liberation. Let the beacons of virtue we lit in Zenith shine bright upon our continued fight for liberation. Death to the Druge. Uxir, General of the Valiant Pegasus. In fact, there's not one opportunity here, but 6. The Empire is faced with many factions here, rival clans of orcs and humans. Once, many of them fought together, but those bonds were shattered when the Empire and the Druze conspired to split the Barrens between them. At present, it's impossible to deal with them as one, and impossible to speak with them all. The best that Highguard might do is use a suitably worded mandate to choose which one of these 6 factions they wish to approach. An example mandate might sound like this. Let every word you speak carry meaning. We send this named priest with 25 liao to urge the virtuous of the 7th wave to reach out to the named faction to show them that we are not their enemy. There is another opportunity, however. Thanks to recent friendships, the words of the Highborn priests echo in the Dawnish Assembly as well as in Highguard. As a result of this, and the carefully chosen words of the order issued by the General of the Griffin's Pride, there is an opportunity for the Dawnish Assembly to pass a similar mandate. They too could pick one of the 6 factions of the Barrens to approach. Example mandate as follows. The virtuous inspire others to greatness. We send a named priest with 25 liao to urge the glorious soldiers of the Dawnish host to reach out to the named faction and inspire them with talk of liberation. If either of these mandates is endorsed after the coming summit, then it will create an opportunity for the generals of the Highborn armies, or the generals of the Dawnish armies, respectively, to meet with representatives of the relevant faction at the following summit. The Great Forest Orcs. The Great Forest Orcs claim the forest of Peitat is a remnant of a great forest that once covered most of the Empire and the Malum. Many of them fled the Barrens when the Druge finally conquered the territory, coming west to seek sanctuary in the Empire. After protracted negotiations, a treaty was signed that allowed these refugees to settle in the Navarre territory of Therunin, provided that they're willing to help defend it. Relationships with the Great Forest Orcs have slowly improved since then. At least the Navarre relationship with them has. They remain hostile and deeply distrustful of the Dornish. Imperial scouts report that there are still numbers of Great Forest Orcs dwelling in the Barrens, mostly in the heart of Peytat. With most of their former leadership in Theranin, they are without doubt one of the weaker factions, few in number with little influence. The fact that many of them fled the Barrens and drew their lot in with the Empire has not improved their standing with the other factions. However, they are one of the easiest faction for the highborn wayfarers and grey pilgrims to approach. The Great Forest Orcs are the least powerful faction in the Barrens, but any negotiation with them would be easier than with any of the other factions. The Black Wind. By all accounts, Ravin was a powerful Orc leader who united the disparate Orc clans that dwell near the Fangs, urging them to rise up against the Druj. Decades of brutal oppression by the Orcs of the Malum had stripped these clans of their history and their ancestry, leaving them weak and directionless. Ravin sought to change that, to forge a new identity through opposition to the Druj. He claimed that they would be a black wind that would sweep the Druj from the Barrens. As Orcs flocked to his banner, they took the rallying cry as their new name, the Black Wind. In winter 377 YE, Ravin and several of his key supporters were killed. Captured by the Druj, they were slain when a force of Imperial heroes used the Sentinel Gate to ambush the camp where they were being held. Their deaths were the catalyst that triggered an armed uprising among the Baron Orcs. Taking advantage of the confusion sown among the Druj leaders by the raid, the renegade Orcs seized the Fangs and began to arm themselves. At their height, the Black Wind were able to muster the equivalent of 2 Imperial armies, making them the most effective independent military force in the Barrens. Sadly, their efforts were doomed. When the Imperial Druj alliance agreed to split the Barrens, the impact was felt most heavily by the Black Wind. Those among their number who were most incensed by what they saw as the treachery of the Empire, the Black Wind, switched sides and threw their lot in with the Druj. Those who still believed the victory against the Druj was possible, the Ravin, fought to the bitter end. The Druj all but exterminated the Ravin, and now only the Black Wind remain. They're a powerful military force, a martial people with thousands of experienced soldiers who form the majority of a Druj army. They hate the Druj with a burning passion, but the only thing they hate more than the Druj is the Empire. The Empire is the one threat that can convince the Black Wind to side with the Druj. Contact with them will be challenging. The Vendari. A secretive group of Orcs who dwell in Saltmarsh. Little is known of the Vendari. Living in the easternmost region of the Barrens on the edge of the Bitter Sea, they're known to have a relationship with the Druj that allows them a modicum of independence and self-rule. As a result, they are widely distrusted by other occupants of the Barrens who consider the Vendari to be self-serving and treacherous. They have little in the way of any effective fighting force, but they claim to be powerful magicians. Regardless of the truth, they are known to be skilled scouts and spies and believed to have knowledge of the Druj and their lands to the east. They sought to join the rebellion when the Barons rose up against the Druj, but deftly switched sides once it was clear that the uprising would fail. Of all the occupants of the Barrens, the Vendari have the least reason to distrust or dislike the Empire. That's not to say they have no reason. The storms that battered the Bitter Sea have inundated Saltmarsh, causing extensive flooding. On the other hand, they apparently pride themselves on being pragmatic. They've never had any significant contact with the Empire, and they were the least affected by the failure of the rebellion. Yet, the other groups in the Barrens have good reason to distrust them. They play every side against the others to their advantage, turning their coats the moment it benefits them, not unlike the Druj themselves. The Empire might convince them to change sides once more, and while there is hope of victory against the Druj, they will stay loyal. But if it looks like the Orcs of Malum will prevail, they will not hesitate to change sides again. The Montagnans. The Orcs are not the only inhabitants of the Barrens. The Montagnans are one of 2 large groups of humans living in the Barrens. the survivors of the Freedom Heresy. They are heretics committed to the false virtue of anarchy, or freedom, as some might know it. They were heavily involved in helping the Barons Orcs put their alliance together in the first place. Their base of their power was Dalfell Keep in the south, but they were forced to annihilate their home with magic to prevent it falling into the hands of the Druge. Many of their number accompanied the Great Forest Orcs southwards, using their knowledge of the Empire to smooth negotiations. Some of them remained in the Barrens, however, scattering into the mountains around Hope's Rest. They seemed determined to make the Druge pay for conquering their home and reinstating their yoke over the people there. They are implacably opposed to the Druge, thanks to a faith which demands opposition to anyone who seeks to impose their rule over the Barons. The same faith leads them to distrust the Empire, which many see as being only a little better than the Druge. The recent Crusaders opened the possibility for communication with the Montanians. In particular, they seem to be impressed by the Empire's stated goal of liberating the Barons, whilst remaining suspicious of their motivations. An Imperial scout was able to bring back a message from the Montanians still in the Barons that said simply, "You are fighting without weapons. If the Empire is serious about liberating the Barons, then you should speak to us. We can show you how to make swords." The Karas. Unlike the Vendari, the Karas are an orc tribe who've never had much history of contact with the Empire. Notably, the Karas did not throw in their lot with the Orc Rebellion, preferring to maintain their position as allies of the Druge, rather than risk it for a worthless cause. They dwell in the far east of the Barons, on the plains of Teeth and the Bleaks for the most part. They're believed to be related somehow to the Sept of Menrathat in Ossium, who apparently enjoy a similar relationship with the Druge there. Distant cousins, perhaps. Within the Barons, they are well known as skilled herbalists, carefully husbanding the scraps of lore the Druge have allowed them. The Vendari and the Black Wind claim the Karas possess some kind of incredibly rare herb that's much prized by the Druge. This claim seems dubious. Nobody's ever met a Druge subject tribe who possessed such a thing. When the Druge really want something, they take it. Still, the rumour persists, and there is no doubt that the Karas enjoy a better relationship with the Druge than any other group in the Barrens. Contacting the Karas is certainly possible, but Imperial prognosticators say that such efforts contain the highest chance that the Druge will be alerted to the Empire's endeavours. Bluntly, the suspicion is that the Karas might simply pass any messages straight to the Druge. The only way to know for sure, however, is to make an attempt. Like the Vendari, while the Karas may be untrustworthy, that does not mean they might not be convinced to side with the other orcs in the Barrens against the tyrants of the Malum. The Dornish. The other group of humans in the Barrens are the Dornish. The Dornish heroes who actively oppose the Druge are already visiting Anvil each summit to confer with their allies. This opportunity represents a chance to speak with the representatives of the Dornish Yeofolk who are currently labouring under the brutal rule of the Druge, who have little contact with the rest of the Empire. Parts of the Empire have a tendency to overlook this fact, particularly since the Druge tore up their treaty with the Empire and finally conquered the entire territory. Despite concerted efforts to get people to safety, there are still people in Dawnguard, Murderdale and the Carmine Fields who consider themselves Dornish. Most are Yeofolk. The Druge carried out a series of brutal executions of the Dornish nobility designed to cow the spirits of those who remained. But there are still a few noble houses who manage to maintain estates here still, surviving as best they can under the spectre of Druge occupation. Obviously, the Dornish who live here are supporters of the Empire's attack on the Druge. However, it's clear that they have significant reservations about the threat to liberate the Barons. They regard this territory as their home. The fact that Dawn's never been able to definitively conquer the territory and claim it as their own doesn't erase centuries of history in which they spilled blood in defence of this land. The possibility of a glorious conquest of the Barons fires the spirits of every Dornish citizen who dwells here, but they are suspicious of the imperial politics that seems to be aiming at something different. They also know that if they actively resist the Druge and the Empire does not throw its full support behind them, they will be wiped out. It is vastly easier for the Empire to approach the Dornish groups who dwell here than any other group. They're keen to support Dorne and the Empire and to play their role in driving the Druj out of the Barrens. They will eagerly accept any help the Empire is able to provide and will rise against the Druj if there is a credible prospect of victory. The more politically astute among their numbers are especially keen to strengthen their position ahead of any possible vote in the Senate about the assignment of the territory. The longer the Empire ignores the dreams and ambitions of the Dornish inhabitants of the Barrens, the more trouble they're likely to store up for the future. The fate of the wicked. There is one other opportunity that has arisen in the light of the orders issued by the General of the Valiant Pegasus. In recent times, a phrase has become more common in the Empire, increasingly used so often that it goes unremarked. A call to action, a call to arms. It demands a rousing chorus of approval and agreement. A simple phrase, just 4 words. Death to the Druj. Those words tap into a visceral desire in the hearts of every Imperial citizen who's suffered under the yoke of Druj oppression. They light a fire that burns to see the wicked punished for the horrors that they have unleashed. The Druj tortured the people of Rykos to break their spirit. Surely it's long past time they suffered for their cruelty. Death to the Druj! No one could witness the destruction the Druj unleashed in Zenith and remain unmoved by it. They despoiled the library simply to destroy everything the Empire held dear. Surely it is time that those who burn books should be consigned to the fire for their barbarism. Death to the Druj! Every land that is forced to endure the Druj suffers under their poisonous touch. They raise pillars of miasma to crush the spirits of everyone they conquer, to allow them to enslave the world. Surely it is now time that the righteous judge the fate of the wicked and bring death to the Druj for their tyranny. There is no imperial virtue that speaks to such ideals, so there is no virtue assembly that might best fan this spark into a fire. But the Assembly of the Way could pass a mandate encouraging soldiers engaged in the Barrens to embrace. When virtue falls quiet, we must hear the words written on the silent page. We send this named priest with 150 doses of Liao to urge every Imperial soldier to embrace the fight against an enemy so wicked it can never be defeated, only destroyed. Death to the Druj! If this mandate is endorsed in the coming season, it will cause every Imperial army fighting the Druj to inflict additional casualties in the upcoming campaign season. Casualties caused will be increased by 1/5. This will not increase the impact of rituals such as Knights of Glory or Quickening Cold Meat, nor will it increase the casualties caused by military units. However, in addition to the hallowing, consecration, and anointing auras created through the use of Liao, this passionate exhortation is certain to see significant numbers of spontaneous spiritual auras arise in every Imperial army, as soldiers are encouraged to act courageously despite the Druj, or to embrace their ambition to bring freedom to the Barrens. Death to the Druj. Conjunction. Varag Soulflayer has captured a number of Montanians and is working on creating tortured souls. Killing the Tepel will stop additional casualties across all Imperial armies in the coming season. The Champion of Vigilance is responsible for killing the Tepel. Varag Soulflayer is one of the many Tepel of the Druj who take a perverse pleasure in tormenting and twisting their captives into enemies of the Empire. The Tepel has taken a number of captives from the Montanians over the last season, and is set up camp within the untrod groves. A few questing knights, following the orders of the late Garavain de Rondel, managed to uncover Varag's camp and have relayed the location to the prognosticator's office. If Varag Soulflayer is not killed, then the Tepel will be able to corrupt a number of captured Montanians and create tortured souls, which will harass Imperials in the Barrens over the coming season. This will deal an additional 500 casualties split across all Imperial armies present in the territory. The Montagnan captives are already terminal. There is no bringing these people back. But what the Empire can offer them is a death free of the Druge. The Tapple will be accompanied by a combined force of troops drawn from the Arcad. Given that it was the orders of Garavain de Rondel to the Griffin's Pride that led to the discovery of Varric's Soulflayer, the responsibility for this conjunction would have been with him, if not for his untimely demise. This is a clear example of a poison in a neighbour's field. So, the responsibility lies with the champion of vigilance. Ravadi Founders Dance.